public debate is fixed on missile defense systems, such as the proposed Golden Dome over Greenland. This is a strategic misdirection. The architecture of 21st century conflict is not based on intercepting kinetic projectiles. It is based on severing the system's nervous system before the launch command is even given. The primary vector of attack is not nuclear, but silent. According to analysts at CSAs, the critical vulnerability is not cities, but the 1.3 million kilometers of subsea fiber optic cables that function as the global economy's spinal cord. A coordinated severing of these data arteries achieves what no missile can: instantaneous economic paralysis. The secondary vector is orbital, satellite blinding, not destruction, which creates traceable debris, but targeted dazzling or spoofing of C4ISR assets. Without its eyes and ears, the global military apparatus becomes a blind leviathan, immensely powerful, yet incapable of processing real-time data. A blind leviathan operates on a single remaining protocol: launch on warning. When situational awareness collapses, pre-programmed responses become the only option. The system defaults to its most kinetic form to prevent a solvency cascade. This transforms regional flashpoints from Iran to the Arctic into tripwires for a systemic, non-discretionary escalation. The motive for kinetic escalation is not strength. It is a systemic solvency crisis. According to analysis from authorities like CSIS, protracted conflicts are increasingly viewed as a domestic liability. This is not a political miscalculation. It is a financial one. When a system can no longer afford its promises, it cannot afford dissent. The war, therefore, is not a foreign policy objective. It is a domestic balance sheet operation. The core weakness is quantifiable. Data from Bankrate shows the systemic decay. In the 1980s, the U.S. financial system projected power through high interest rates, a form of gravitational control over global capital. Today, the leverage is gone. The system operates on near-zero liquidity, a mathematical signal of terminal decline. Financial leverage has become a systemic liability. This weakness forces a pivot to asymmetry. Rival economic blocs are not waiting for a collapse. They are engineering it. According to sources, the Indian Central Bank has proposed linking BRICS's digital currencies. This is not a proposal. It is a declaration of financial warfare. It establishes a parallel protocol designed to systematically dismantle the solvency of the dollar-based settlement system. When financial coercion fails, kinetic action becomes the only remaining vector. This is not a theory. It is the system's pre-programmed response. The heightened fear in the Middle East of a U.S.-Israel attack on Iran is a symptom. The strategic placement of assets, like missile defense systems in the Arctic, as analyzed by Eurasia Review, is another. These are not isolated policy decisions. They are nodes in a global launch-on-warning posture, triggered by financial threat. The inescapable conclusion: the pivot to war is a solvency event. It is a forced, asymmetric response to an unwinnable economic reality. The primary motive is to externalize the impending solvency cascade, converting domestic liabilities into a kinetic cost imposed on a rival. Weakness is the accelerant. Conflict is the calculus. The core strategic calculation has inverted. The economics of lethality are no longer a linear equation. According to analyses by the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, the cost-exchange ratio in modern conflict has been fractured. A state invests $5 million in a main battle tank, a pillar of industrial-era military doctrine. A rival actor, state or non-state, deploys a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a balanced exchange. It is an economic annihilation. The tank becomes a multi-million-dollar liability, vulnerable to an asset that costs 1/10,000th of its price. This systemic shift is termed the democratization of violence. The financial barrier to inflict strategic, kinetic damage has effectively collapsed. When a hegemon's most expensive assets can be neutralized for the cost of a consumer electronic, its entire model of power projection becomes insolvent. Military escalation is the final, desperate attempt to reset this asymmetric cost-benefit vector back in its favor. The regional instability you are being shown is a misdirection. CSIS reports on social and political friction in allied nations are not evidence of systemic failure. They are blueprints for a proxy laboratory. These gray zones are controlled environments designed to test hybrid warfare protocols and gauge public compliance thresholds before full-scale deployment. This is not chaos. It is a clinical stress test of the system itself. The accelerant for this protocol is the documented dismantling of the US-led financial architecture. Sources confirm India's central bank has formally proposed linking the BRICS bloc's digital currencies. This is not a theoretical threat. It is an active, systemic bypass of the dollar network. It is an economic declaration of war, and the response vector is pre-programmed. When financial leverage becomes a liability, the system escalates to its final form of control. The first kinetic staging ground is the Middle East. According to the New Arab, regional actors are operating under the assumption of an imminent US-Israel attack on Iran. This is not a localized conflict. It is the strategic prepositioning of assets to secure global energy choke points in a post-dollar solvency crisis. The second and more critical staging ground is the Arctic. Analysis in the Eurasia Review details the strategic necessity of Greenland for a Golden Dome missile defense system. Control of the Arctic is not about resources. It is about securing launch-on-warning superiority and controlling the Northern Passage, the ultimate kinetic backstop for a system that has lost financial control. The mechanism is a mathematical certainty. As the BRICS financial protocol achieves escape velocity, the hegemon's response shifts from economic coercion to kinetic containment. The gray zone labs in the West are for perfecting social control tactics. The military buildups in Iran and the Arctic are the tangible result. This isn't a policy debate. It is the execution of a solvency preservation protocol. The math doesn't lie. The system requires full-spectrum dominance to survive its own solvency cascade. The laboratories have provided the data. The primary staging grounds are being armed. Therefore, the next 12 months will see the activation of a new gray zone focused on disrupting rival bloc supply chains. RUSI analysts project this will manifest as engineered instability, targeting key maritime logistics hubs in Southeast Asia or East Africa, turning trade routes into friction points. The Nuclear Command Protocol is not based on emotion. It is based on physics. The launch-on-warning doctrine is a systemic necessity dictated by time and distance. Once an intercontinental ballistic missile is detected, the decision window for a retaliatory strike is measured in single-digit minutes. Waiting for impact confirmation is not a strategy. It is a guarantee of decapitation. The system is therefore engineered to launch on the warning, not the impact. This is not a policy choice. It is a mathematical function of orbital mechanics. This protocol, however, contains a systemic vulnerability. The entire early warning architecture, from space-based infrared satellites to ground-based radar systems like those proposed for Greenland, is a digital network. It is a stream of data. The most potent asymmetric attack is not to spoof an incoming missile, but to blind the sensors. A targeted cyber attack can induce a systemic shutdown, creating a digital fog of war. In that moment, the commander is faced with a zero-sum calculation. Is the data blackout a system malfunction, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike designed to neutralize command and control before impact? As analysts at CSIS have consistently warned, in the absence of information, the protocol defaults to the worst-case scenario. The fear of being annihilated while waiting for clarity forces a decision. This is the fog of digital war. The ambiguity itself becomes the weapon. The kinetic cost of miscalculation is absolute. When a rival power can trigger a potential launch sequence without firing a single missile, they achieve maximum leverage at minimum cost. The doctrine designed to ensure survival becomes the primary vector for systemic collapse. The launch is forced not by an enemy missile, but by the fear of one in the dark. The core axiom is non-negotiable. A systemic solvency crisis is a kinetic accelerant. As rival economic blocs execute protocols designed to bypass the dollar-denominated financial system, the incumbent's response vector must shift from financial leverage to physical denial. Reports indicating India's central bank is proposing to link BRICS's digital currencies are not a minor headline. They are a declaration of systemic financial warfare. When financial leverage becomes a liability, military force becomes the final backstop of solvency. Analysts at CSIS have repeatedly modeled the vulnerability of global subsea infrastructure. The increasing talk of conflict from the Middle East to the Arctic is not a policy deviation. It is the system's launch-on warning protocol to preempt a liquidity cascade. A full kinetic confrontation, such as an overt attack on Iran, carries an unacceptably high cost and clear attribution. Therefore, the next phase is not war, but a calibration shot. It must be disruptive, deniable, and economically targeted. The objective is to demonstrate that digital protocols are subordinate to physical control. Within the next 12 months, expect a catastrophic failure of a critical subsea data cable nexus, likely in the Red Sea or the Strait of Malacca, severing terabits of financial data flow between Eurasian and BRICS-aligned economies. The event will be attributed to a seismic event or a dragging ship anchor. It will not be an act of war. It will be a mathematical message. Your new system is only as real as the physical infrastructure we allow it to run on.